the strategy session from Resolute Square. I am joined tonight by Joe Trippi, famous Democratic strategist, and by Stuart Stevens, famous Republican strategist. And I'm your host, Rick Wilson, that guy who says the things that you think and don't put down so you won't get reprimanded by HR. Anyway, folks, it is great to be with you tonight. I hope you are all having a fine evening. We're going to talk tonight about the incredibly expanding, rapidly growing Republican primary field. And as the anti-Trump lane fills up with many, many more warm bodies, tomorrow night we're going to have the big news that was no secret to anyone that Ron DeSantis, Meatball, Tater, Little Ronnie, is going to announce for president. He's doing it in a way that's not like a normal candidate would do it. He's not going to stand up in front of a room of people who love and adore him, because that's really hard to accomplish, because very few people love and adore him. He's not going to do a big speech about sweeping issues. No, he's going to do a Twitter Spaces with Elon Musk. I got nothing, honestly. It is a perfect example of why people who don't like people, the weirdness in that room isn't going to average out between the two of them. It's going to multiply. It may rise on a logarithmic scale. But with me tonight, as I said, are two guys who have been to their share of presidential rodeos. And I'm going to start out with you, Stuart. Um, how do you see this opening compared to the other campaign openings you've seen before from Republican candidates? Then I'm going to ask the same question to Joe in a couple minutes.
Well, I mean, you know, I guess they had a choice of doing that, or they could each bring a friend, but they couldn't find one. Um, this is one of these things you've said in those rooms. We've all said in those rooms where it seems like a good idea for 5 minutes and a terrible idea if you think about it for 10 minutes.
Right.
But it's like, oh, we should do this on Twitter. We should,
Yeah,
Um,
that's the ticket.
yeah, what I want to know is, so between them, these guys have 5 wives and 12 children, right?
Uh,
Um,
12 or 13, yeah.
12 or
I
Yeah.
think DeSantis
13.
has
Yeah.
three, right? I don't know.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay. So I have 13. So this is like the family values guy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it
Right.
it really, it really, and also, I mean, all of Musk's businesses depend on federal subsidies.
Correct.
I mean, he's never made a dollar off any car that's sold. It's the federal subsidies. The same
Right.
with
It's
SpaceX.
the energy
Yeah.
efficiency
Yeah,
vouchers.
I mean, he's the ultimate sort of corporate welfare entrepreneur. I mean, he does great stuff, but I mean, this is all just right there. The stuff that DeSantis says that we shouldn't
Well,
do.
and it's interesting because Elon on Twitter is like, I'm the free speech absolutist. I believe that everybody deserves to be heard, including the Nazis and the anti-Semites and the Holocaust deniers and the vaccine truthers and all this other stuff. And yet Ron DeSantis is the leading governor of a program of broad censorship in America right now
Right.
that has been implemented down to the point today where Amanda Gorman, the young African American poet who read a piece that she had written for Joe Biden's inauguration, there have now her books have been banned in Dade County under DeSantis's book banning program. It's crazy. Joe, talk to us about what you see in this rollout.
Uh, Look, I just think it's talking to your own echo chamber, right? I mean, it's what Musk is. I just don't see how it reaches. Well, it may be perfect for DeSantis, right? I mean, it's going after the Trump sweet spot, his dear beloved Twitter,
Right.
that he's no longer on. And so as a dig at Trump, I mean, it may get, I could see that, and even Elon Musk being part of that, I could see that getting under, Trump's very thick skin, Rick. I mean, and like, but other than that, I really don't see anything to come of it. I mean,
Like,
it's
why?
it's
Why? I
based,
mean, the weirdness of a Twitter Spaces, and you guys, we've all done. We were talking about this
yeah,
before we came on the
yeah,
air.
Yep.
it doesn't
The
really
weirdness of
work.
Twitter Spaces is, and we've got some pretty technically sophisticated people around us. There's still always a shit show. There's still always a complete mess, and it's fascinating to me that they're doing it this way because, I mean, in part, it's because they want to sit Ron DeSantis in a room somewhere without anybody else around him except Casey, So he doesn't have to make eye contact with people. He doesn't have to talk to people or shake hands. And speaking of that, the three of us have all been to the famous, diner scenes in New Hampshire. That video from this weekend of DeSantis in the diner, I don't know where you guys rank that on a weird scale, but man, Stuart, that
That
was
was like
so
off the charts
painful.
weird.
It was
Yeah, I mean,
painful.
It was.
at a certain point when you run for president, it helps to like people,
Yeah,
and because you have to go out and be around people. And DeSantis just sends out this vibe. I mean, you nailed it very, very early. You were around him, Rick. Um, like, why are you in my space? Why do I have to go through this?
right,
You know, as opposed to like, I mean, the ultimate guy is Bill Clinton, who was like,
Right.
some sort of alien that would take whatever energy and like multiple
right.
Ghostbusters or
Right.
something.
And he would come out of every room. People were like, "I love him. He's my best
Yeah,
friend."
and he had this ability. He has this ability to talk to you, and you think that you're the most important person in the world in that
Yep.
moment. I mean, it's incredibly intoxicating, incredibly seductive. Um, and it just, the thing about the
But
whole DeSantis campaign is, what is the purpose of it? I mean, what is there? He's yet to roll out any kind of policy. He had this one weird thing about Ukraine where, on Monday he had one position, on Tuesday he tried to walk it back.
Right,
Um, and he hasn't put out any economic plans. He hasn't, it's, I'm mad at the world. I'm running for president. You're mad at the world. Let's be mad at the world together.
right.
I just think that's a pretty
yeah,
limited audience
well,
for that.
but Trump's better at being mad at the world
Yeah,
than
he
getting people
is.
to
Oh
be mad.
yeah, Trump's the
But the
Trump's
other
the
thing is
master of that.
maybe he had to do Twitter because maybe CNN wouldn't give him an hour. I mean, that could be why he has to do the thing with Musk. I mean, maybe CNN sort of like saying, no, 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 we don't want to touch that stove again.
Well,
And
shouldn't Trump just come back on Twitter, right?
Trump should do a Twitter
650?
Spaces at the same time.
Yeah,
It would
Yeah.
break the internet.
yeah.
If
It
Trump did
really,
his own Twitter Spaces, it would break the internet.
Yes.
yeah.
I mean,
I mean,
Well, it would definitely break Twitter Spaces. We know that.
oh
So
yeah, right. uh, I think there's probably like a 70% chance tonight that Elon Musk is standing in a server room with a cat of nine tails saying to the tech guys, if this doesn't work, you're all dead.
yeah. I mean, I mean, if you were at a party with an alien and Elon Musk and Ron DeSantis, you would walk out talking about how weird Musk and DeSantis are. I mean, these guys are just,
no, that's I loved your
yeah,
tweet. Your tweet was
they're
Right.
great.
just, I mean, and the thing about it, Musk won't ask him any tough questions
No. He
because,
won't. And
first,
again, it's like I suspect Elon Musk and they're going to talk about the woke mind virus, and they're going to speak in a code that is for a edge of a fraction of a percentage, even of the MAGA crazies. Because
yeah, I
the
mean,
whole woke thing is it's
what
a
are the
code in
odds
the
that
white
Musk is going to be
supremacist side of the
stoned?
equation.
Yeah, I mean, the guy seems to spend a lot of time smoking dope. What you know this was his defense when he tweeted stuff that got him in trouble with the SEC,
Right.
that he was stoned, which I thought was a great.
Hey, but
You're a
he might
shareholder, you
ask
go,
he
great.
might ask DeSantis about his Doge wallet or something, his crypto
Right.
wallet. They can get into that stuff. That could
Ron, will
that
your
could be
campaign have
interesting to people.
NFTs?
Yeah, it could be interesting.
Well,
I'd like to know if DeSantis. I'd like to know if Elon Musk has ever voted. It'd be an interesting thing to. Somebody should do a
that's
little
a great
research,
question. We
get a
could
little
find out.
oppo file. Um,
But
I bet he hasn't voted. I bet
the
ever.
elephant in the room, though, today DeSantis started to try to distance himself from Trump, and I think the second most mildly passive aggressive way I've ever heard, where he said his famous ad in 2018 that got him elected, the Trump ad, build the wall ad. He said, "Oh, it was meant to be satirical." First off, I don't think Ron DeSantis understands satire at any level whatsoever. He is the most humorless turd I've ever seen in politics, and I've seen some people who were really not funny people, but it doesn't strike you that that is like a pretty weak way to start distancing yourself
Yeah,
from a guy you begged.
yeah. And those ads weren't satirical. I mean, come on. It's like And I agree with you. He wouldn't even know what satire is, or have the ability to deliver it. I think what's crazier to me still, and I still don't get it, with all these people getting in. We'll talk about Scott and the
Yeah.
others, but it is okay. We know. I mean, it's like no one learned anything from 2016. No one, not anybody.
Nope.
Let's see. No, let's get more people in.
Right.
Oh, DeSantis is faltering, so I'll get in. Oh, Chris Christie, they're all like, just jumping into this thing. How they have not learned that big a field. Just basically, just why don't you just coordinate? You have a nice parade and coordinate Trump, and then at the same time, the one question I still don't get is, okay, one of you beats him. How the hell do you
Right.
think? I mean, you go through all that trouble, you raise all that money, you run around, you get attacked, he goes after you. You're not going to get the nomination anyway, but for some reason you're still going to do it. And somehow you luck out and you actually get by him. I don't, but then Donald's going to like be your best buddy and rally
Right.
everybody to you. I mean, I don't understand how any of them think this ends up with them being president of the United States. So, is Scott running for vice president? I mean, what is going on here?
Well, let's talk
DeSantis,
about
I
Tim
think,
Scott.
actually want,
Yeah.
or his,
No, it is a great question, Joe, because uh, they cannot see past the first turn in this race. They cannot see past the first turn where if one of them beats Trump and he just says one thing one day, it was illegitimate, Ron stole it from me, he and the deep state got together. Okay. And you turn down MAGA turnout, what, 5, 7, 10%, maybe more. And and in fact, the model that the Lincoln Project guys have been polling is much higher than that, but we'll talk about that another night. Um, so Tim Scott, the
yeah,
second candidate from the great state of South Carolina, an affable, friendly African American Republican, got in the race this week and gave a speech that, honestly, guys, Stuart, if you and I had heard that speech back in 2008 or 2004, we would have said, wow, this guy has a massive future. He is warm, he's friendly, has an optimistic, prospective message. He's not, appealing to the worst angels of our nature. And, and now, in this day and age, that speech went over like a fart in a hurricane. It was
Yeah,
just absolutely dead.
it goes to this resistance to admit the world that we're living in.
Right.
That
right.
that they want to somehow think that all this Trump stuff didn't happen, that all of this embrace of violence of the party didn't happen, that he still won't say, DeSantis and Scott still won't say that Joe Biden won a free and fair election. So they're running for office. I mean, it seems like that should be like a base requirement in a democracy, to admit that you're running in a democracy. And, Scott got
Right.
asked that question. He said, what would you do differently than Trump? And he said, well, nothing.
Yeah, no, DeSantis says Trump can't win, but he won't say that Trump didn't win. I mean, he didn't win
Right.
in
Yeah.
2016, but he can't win in 2020. It's an amazingly twisted pretzel argument that they're all doing.
Isn't it weird though that I mean we heard all those again, like you were saying, Joe. We've learned nothing. Well, we have. Other people have not learned a damn thing from 2016 because the electability argument. Marco made it. Ted made it. Jeb
Hmm.
made it. Rand. Everybody was out there saying, "No, he can't win. He can't win." And remember, Hillary Clinton's campaign loved the idea of running against Donald Trump because like he can't win.
Yep.
We'll beat him, and we'll win in 35 states. How'd that work out for you, Hillary? Not so well.
Yeah. I always like, remember Jack Germain, the old political warhorse. He had this saying that those who depend on electability seldom are, which
Right.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think is, it just sort
But
of sums that up.
Well, that
Um,
was
but
Marco in a
but
nutshell.
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, he couldn't win. But you see, like I look at this and it's like Tim Scott. Okay, so like theoretically, like in the old political ways of not so long ago, 7 or 8 years ago, it would be brilliant, great for him to become the VP on the Republican ticket. Trump. You could say, man, if Trump were smart or normal, you pick Scott. The problem now is he picks Tim Scott. Even first of all, that'll never happen. But if he did, he loses all his white supremacist vote. So it's like kind of like there's like no way. It's the whole problem with this party. There's no way. It's Trump's party now. You cannot. Even the
Yeah.
old machinations about how you would put a ticket together are not going to work. Just won't
No, I
work.
think that's right, Joe. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, there's not any, every time Republicans nominate or elect a black candidate, they don't get more of the black vote
No.
than a white person. It's just sort of, I mean, they just, this is a Herschel Walker thing, because they elected, you
Right.
can just see what happened was, okay, the Democrats nominated and elected an African-American senator, so we'll go get an African-American.
Right.
I mean, at its root, it's just, so we have to go to Texas, but we'll
Yeah.
get one, He's crazy, but I mean, look, he
I
scored
think it's
touchdowns.
also interesting that that so many candidates right now in the field are thinking they're going to pull off one early win and it'll change the game and Trump can't win. DeSantis is putting a lot of money and time and people and his super PAC into Iowa. You got Chris Sununu and Chris Christie both looking at New Hampshire. You got Nikki Haley and Tim Scott both looking at South Carolina. And it's fascinating to me that they still think the old rules apply, where, an early victory will give me momentum and money and everything else. I mean, people forget Ted Cruz won Iowa over Donald Trump in 2016. I think
Yep.
that's another area we need to like lay a marker down that the way the early states work out only plays to Trump's advantage. Because if he wins one of them or two of them, it's going to sweep the field and people are going to say, okay, well, that's it. We're done.
Yeah, I don't know if I was Trump, if I would campaign in Iowa.
Right?
I don't know. I mean, I would certainly think about not doing it. When McCain made the decision not to campaign in Iowa, I was working for Bush in
Right.
2000, right? So, we were the geniuses. We had a 65-point lead in New Hampshire. We ended up losing by 19. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you really, while outspending the
That
other
takes
guy like 3 to
work.
1.
Right.
I mean, you really have to work at that shit. But, I had this theory, and I was absolutely convinced I was wrong. Right. And I couldn't have been more wrong. That the bump that you would get out of Iowa if you won, which Bush did win, that
Mm-hmm.
it would sweep away anything that happened in New Hampshire. But
Mm-hmm.
exact opposite of that. People in New Hampshire didn't give a
Right.
shit about what happened in
Yeah.
Iowa.
Not a bit. Not a
They
bit.
could have cared less. I mean, McCain was up there saying, I love you so much, I'm not going to go to Iowa. They're going to go, well, that bothers me. I mean, that makes me, like, whoever
Yeah.
said, like, being told how important
It
you are is a bad thing. And
it never works. It's never worked in any of the races I've ever been in. I mean, going back, into the 80s all the way through the recent times,
Right.
it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't work that way. The other thing is with Sununu, if Sununu gets in, then New Hampshire isn't going to matter. It's just, we went
Correct.
through that in the Democratic Party when Tom Harkin, the senator from Iowa, went. Clinton skipped it. The entire world said, "Oh, that's fine.
everybody
It's going to
skipped.
be Harkin." Everybody skipped it, and the primary, it just had no. Iowa was out. It had no impact. Actually, it's part of
Yep.
the first time that Iowa actually started to lose any mojo was because of that in 1992. But that's what's going to happen if Sununu gets in. He creams Trump or whoever. If
Right.
anybody's stupid enough to go up there, it won't matter. So he's
Although I
not,
talked to
and
somebody
he
from New
doesn't gain
Hampshire the other
anything from a
day
win.
the other day who said Sununu he's like one of these guys like a Charlie Baker or a Jim Douglas or a Larry Hogan who has managed to bridge both eras, but not by much.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's an argument that if once it gets to a real Republican primary, um, there are enough fanatic Trumpers in New Hampshire to blow it up. Um, which is fascinating to me because that will be a big battlefield. I mean, look, I think the only question in South Carolina is whether Nikki Haley and Tim Scott come in third or fourth, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
And New Hampshire will be like the graveyard of Chris Christie, and and if he gets in, where do you think Glenn Youngkin plays? I think he has to go to New Hampshire if you're Youngkin, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that would be, and you can't run if Sununu runs.
Right.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
I don't think Sununu will run. That's unburdened by evidence and opinion. But I used to spend a lot of time with him back in the day with his dad, and
I
working
knew
in the
the dad. Yeah.
campaign.
Yeah.
And I just, I can't see why he would do it without believing that he could really win. And I
Yeah.
don't see that he could talk himself into thinking that he's really going to win. Um,
Hmm.
another guy, how old is he? 52 something? I don't know. If you wait 4 years,
Right.
you seem to be in a much better position. And they're not where the party are. Those guys you were talking about, like Charlie
Yeah.
Baker, Hogan,
Right.
you know, they're wildly popular. Scott, guy I used to work for. They in Vermont, they can't pick their own state party chairman.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I mean, give me a break. I don't
Yeah.
think that they have
I
any.
just I think some of this is also there's a sort of national media sense right now among elite reporters. They really, really would love a little horse race between
Mm-hmm.
DeSantis and
Yeah.
Trump. They would love to have this turn into a contest, even though the same things that they did in 2016 that led to Trump's victory in the Republican primary, they will do the same things again. He will go out there and chew up all the scenery. He will yell and scream. And you've got guys like Tim Scott and DeSantis and maybe Youngkin that are much more methodical and unable to move on their feet in the same way. So they'll sit down and they'll go, well, we should focus group what Trump just said, or we should write up a series of messages in response.
Right.
And by that time, Trump has gone on to the next damn thing and showed up naked on stage or whatever to keep
And
blowing up over
Yeah.
and over.
Absolutely.
Youngkin, they went to great lengths to make sure Youngkin didn't have a primary. He was
Hmm.
nominated at a
They
convention.
bought
Couldn't.
it. They
He
bought the
couldn't. He
party. It was a
couldn't have
Yeah.
leverage
won. He
buyout.
couldn't have won a primary.
Yeah. There.
And if he ran, he would have had to take positions that would have disqualified him. I
Right.
tell you guys, if you haven't gone back and looked at Trump's announcement speech in Waco lately, I mean, that is one of the more astounding moments in American political history.
Yeah.
A guy up there, at the 30th anniversary of the Branch Davidians, a guy running for retribution. I mean, that passion, that anger,
Hmm.
opening
Yeah.
with this pledge of allegiance to the insurrectionist.
Right.
I mean, that you put that up against these kind of good vibes that a Youngkin or a Scott would run on.
Right.
I mean,
That
Yeah.
idea of
it's
like
too
we have
hard.
to have an optimistic
Well,
message to reach many more
it's
people. Yeah.
it
Okay.
still gets back to something we've all talked about for months, is that all these people they're getting, and Youngkin being very good example of it, have no clue of what it takes to run for president of the United States. Youngkin, who
No.
didn't have a primary, who bought the convention thing, who did it that way, has no clue what a knockdown, drag out primary is, let alone what happens if you actually get the nomination, with everything gunning at you. And that's the
Youngkin,
same, I
yeah,
think, for Scott, for all these other people that are getting in. Even DeSantis really has never I think
No.
had a kind of
No.
race
no,
No.
that
not
I
at all.
would
I
prepare
can
you for
speak.
this.
Yeah, I can speak to that very directly. The idea that Ron DeSantis won a 19-point victory in Florida is the same exact analogy of people who say Hillary Clinton won by 38 points in New York.
Right.
It's a blue state where you're supposed to win. In Florida, it's a deep red state. He outspent his opponent 9-1. And Charlie Crist, we all know Charlie, is a faded star. Ron DeSantis should have won by 29 points, not 19. This idea that he can take the Florida system of the Republican Party here, the best party in the country,
Yep.
that knows how to do all this
Right.
stuff in Florida and scale it elsewhere is a complete fantasy. It's not going
Yeah,
to
and
work.
and let's don't forget, Bill Weld won re-election in Massachusetts by
Sure.
33 points. That didn't mean he was going to be president. And
Right.
and Rick Perry, who DeSantis most reminds me of. Rick Perry
Yes.
won re-election by I think 12 points. And that
Sounds
guy
about right. Yeah.
actually was a pretty good politician. I
Yeah, he,
mean,
he really
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
was.
he had a good story. He liked people. Um, he might not have been the smartest guy in the room, but it was not absurd to think that that guy and a big state governor could be. And it took one debate, and Mitt Romney just took him apart.
Mitt Romney just
And
dissected him on stage.
yeah, I mean, that never happened to him before. Like
And
somebody
when yeah,
started questioning.
Stuart, that's a really good insight because back in that moment in time, Rick Perry had this amazing economic story he could have
Mm-hmm.
told. He was a center right governor in a state where
Yeah.
he had had enormous job growth and enormous economic prosperity, and people thought of Texas as like the golden star in the American economy, and completely lacked the skills to deliver the message, which I think is going to end up being where the whisper campaign in the DeSantis world will start almost immediately. Like, oh well, no one's adequately giving him a message he can deliver. Well, I think we're going to have a lot of fun with Ron DeSantis, to be perfectly honest. And I hope the campaign goes on for a long time where he and Trump can batter each other for a while. It's for the good of the country. Fiona asked, why do you think DeSantis is doing this in 2028 rather than 2024? I think that's the question's flipped, but he's doing it in 2024 because he has a very, 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 very ambitious partner.
Yeah.
That's
Hmm.
my
That's what I
that's
was.
my
Yeah.
read on it. Is
Yeah.
that she's pushed him into this. He didn't need to do this year. He's not ready. He probably knows in his heart of hearts he's not ready. But she wants it to happen now. She has East Wing fantasies that I've never seen with anybody else. And the interesting projection of like Hillary Clinton was always considered this conniving spouse who was vicious to the staff and who was the secret behind the throne. And Republicans projected that on her for decades. And in Casey DeSantis's case, if you read the Politico article from this week, she sure looks a lot more like Hillary than Hillary ever looked like Hillary.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, she also has this weird vibe. I mean, the way she dresses, and it's like Kathleen Guilford or something, whatever that woman's name is, playing Jackie Kennedy. I
Right?
mean,
Right.
it's like
Exactly.
I don't. It's like we're
It's like
playing dress up or
cosplay or
something.
something. It's a little weird. It's a little weird how performative it is.
Yeah, it's very mannered. It's
Yeah,
very
very mannered. Very,
yeah.
very. So, all right. Will
But
DeSantis ever be
something,
ready?
Rick, we
Yeah,
haven't
yeah.
talked about is the impact of they've now set the trial date in March, right, for
They
Trump.
have. I just saw
Yeah,
that before we went on the air.
yeah, like March 24th. So it seems to me that that is going to play in Trump's favor
Absolutely.
because
Hmm.
you know I could make a case, maybe, I don't know, I could argue this round or flat, that if the guy was tried and convicted, that maybe it could, it would be on
Yeah.
appeal though. But the fact that in the heart of this primary season, he's going to be going into this trial supposedly,
Right.
and a party that is a grievance party, what greater cross can you bear
Absolutely.
than being, persecuted by this
No,
African
and
American
and
man
all
who
these
actually
people
dares?
running against him will have to say, "How dare you do this to to
That's
Donald
right,
Trump?"
Joe.
I mean, that's the
Yeah,
whole, because they need the MAGA votes. So this is the whole conundrum here about, I don't get, you cannot make this circle. It doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work where I can see any of them. I mean, that's me. Wave a wand, tell me, which one has the magic, and I still don't see how the hell they get there from here on so many different possible ways that they get
Right.
taken down.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at all the ideas behind these different candidacies. Tim Scott, the idea he's an African American Republican, charismatic, optimistic. Nikki Haley, that she's a successful governor. Glenn Youngkin, that he's got infinite money and won in a purple state. Ron DeSantis, that he's got all the establishment and all the money behind him and all the National Review guys behind him, and that he'll be the one who can be Trump without being Trump. It all falls apart the minute one of them gets on stage with this guy and
yeah,
punches him, because as I remember a person very close to Jeb said to me, well, we've got a comedy writer who's worked up some really good zingers against Trump tonight in a debate. I was like, what are you talking about? He's
yeah,
going to destroy him. And of course, when Ron DeSantis gets up on stage and makes one sort of klutzy, weird, awkward, kind of sort of maybe joke about Trump, and Trump takes his head off and plays it with it on the stage like a soccer ball, people are going to lose their minds. And this
Yep.
idea that you've got this giant pool of money that will save Ron DeSantis, a guy with no charisma. I'm really still very short on Ron DeSantis.
yeah. There are a bunch of vegetarians running in a carnivor's race, and bet on the guy who enjoys hurting people,
Right.
enjoys humiliating people. It's not like, I mean, see, we've all worked for people that like, I don't want to do this, but if I have to do it, I'll.
Right.
This is a
Yeah.
guy that, if you said you can be president of the United States if you ran a 100% positive campaign, he would go, it's not worth it.
Right.
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 Exactly.
It's not. I mean, why
That's
do
not going to
that?
be
I
any
mean,
fun. Yeah. That's
Right.
I
I'm
not.
mean,
not. I
I
won't get.
mean,
I won't get my vicarious
what
thrills.
am I going to wake up every morning and be
yeah.
nice?
I mean, Trump
I
is a
mean,
legitimately sadistic guy and a legitimately cruel guy,
yeah, he's a
and
psychopath.
Ron DeSantis is the kind of guy who outsources the cruelty.
Hmm.
He wants to have somebody else fire the guy. He wants to have somebody else, be the hatchet person. And in his own circle, as the Politico article demonstrates, and as Susie Wiles will certainly tell anyone who listens, he outsources that stuff to Casey or to Christina Pushaw online. And so I think that genuine cruelty is what speaks to the MAGA base a lot more eloquently and
Yeah.
fluently than the fake cruelty. Well, guys, it is 7:30. I appreciate you both joining me tonight on the show. Um, we will be back again next Tuesday with more examinations of the insanity that is the Republican Party right now. Give you some more insight on and I think by next week we'll be able to go into the DeSantis announcement a little bit and tease it apart and give you guys some real insight into like what's driving the underside of this campaign. So with that, thanks for tuning into Resolute Square tonight. Hope you'll join us on resolutesquare.com. Sign up for our newsletters. Join us as a member. We've got my podcast, The Enemies List, Joe's podcast, That Trippy Show. We've got Burn the Boats with Ken Harbaugh. We got some great podcast content coming out every week. We've got our newsletter every week, which is exclusive writing from us and from
Some
Reed and some other
tremendous
folks
writers. Tremendous
who
writers.
Yeah.
are around the pro democracy movement, that are just absolutely top notch. The creative talent is amazing. Really encourage you to join us on that. And with that, we will see you guys again next Tuesday.
See you guys.
See you, everybody. Take care.